Humans are weird. That's what I always say. Nobody ever listens to me. But I, Vortek Dunzar, third-ranked xenobiologist of the Galactic Confederation Academy, have been studying these bizarre creatures for 12 cycles now. Trust me when I say they're absolutely, undeniably weird. Take Cadet Jackson Reeves, for example. I was assigned to observe his training class as part of my ongoing research into human physiological responses. The Confederation had recently allowed humans to join our prestigious military academy, and the brass wanted data. Lots of data. Not that anyone would actually read my reports, they never do. I just file them away where they collect digital dust in some forgotten database. Professor Dunzar, you're mumbling again, my assistant Telva whispered, nudging me with one of her 4 appendages. Her violet skin glistened under the training arena lights. I do not mumble. I vocalize my thoughts at a perfectly reasonable volume, I replied, adjusting my observation goggles. And I was simply noting that Cadet Reeves appears to be showing off again. Down in the training arena, 20 cadets from 12 different species were running the combat course. Most moved with careful precision, navigating the obstacles with well-practiced maneuvers. The Brolians slithered elegantly. The Mantideans leapt with calculating jumps. The Cynthians phased through certain barriers, as was their natural ability, and then there was Jackson Reeves. The human was charging through the course like a crawl beast during mating season. No finesse. No careful planning. Just raw, reckless momentum. He's going to hurt himself, Telva noted, her 4 eyes blinking asynchronously. Again, I added, pulling up his medical file on my datapad. This would be the 7th time this month. One might think a species would evolve some sense of self-preservation. Instructor Greel, a massive Vargan with skin like polished granite, stood at the edge of the arena, watching the cadets with his characteristic scowl. Faster, maggots, he bellowed. His voice echoed throughout the chamber. A deceased maternal progenitor could navigate this course more efficiently. I rolled all 3 of my eyes. Vargans and their military theatrics, so unnecessary. Oh no, Telva gasped. I looked up just in time to see Cadet Reeves attempt to vault over a plasma barrier. The barrier, of course, was designed to be navigated around, not over. But try telling that to a human. The energy field caught him mid-jump. There was a bright flash, and the distinct crackling sound of plasma meeting organic matter. The human was thrown backward, landing with a sickening thud against the metal floor. Medical team to the arena. I sighed into my communicator, already pulling up the incident report form I'd have to file. Again. Cadet down with plasma burns and potential. Wait, Telva interrupted, gripping my arm so tightly I felt my circulation begin to cut off. Look, in the arena, Cadet Reeves was getting up. His training uniform was singed across the chest, wisps of smoke still curling from the fabric. A dark red liquid, blood. I reminded myself, humans have that iron-based stuff, trickled from his nose and a cut above his eye. But he was standing. Wobbling. Yes, but definitely standing. That's not possible, I muttered, checking my readings. The plasma barrier is calibrated to deliver a non-lethal but completely incapacitating shock to any biological entity. He should be unconscious. Reeves. Instructor Greel's voice boomed. What do you think you're doing? The human cadet wiped the blood from his face with his sleeve, leaving a crimson streak across his forehead. Then he grinned. Actually grinned. Finishing the course, sir. He called back, his voice raspy but surprisingly strong. And then, to my absolute disbelief, he started jogging again. Jogging. With plasma burns across his torso, with blood leaking from his face. The absolute lunacy of it. Professor, Telva whispered, your recording equipment is still functioning, yes? Because no one is going to believe this. Oh, it's recording, I assured her, my scientific curiosity now fully engaged, and Cadet Reeves has just volunteered himself for a very thorough examination when this is over. In the arena, the other cadets had paused in their training to watch the human. Even Instructor Greel seemed momentarily speechless, his forearms hanging limply at his sides. Cadet Reeves had reached the climbing wall, the final obstacle before the finish line. Most species would take it slowly, finding secure handholds, especially after sustaining an injury. The human grabbed the first hold and began to pull himself up with alarming speed. His endorphin levels must be off the charts, I muttered, making notes. Adrenaline response at maximum capacity. Fascinating how pain seems to motivate rather than deter him. Is that normal for humans? Telva asked. Normal? For humans? Hey, I'm not convinced that word applies to their species at all. Cadet Reeves reached the top of the wall, and rather than climbing carefully down the other side as regulations dictated, simply jumped. He landed with a roll that looked painful, sprung back to his feet, and crossed the finish line with his arms raised in triumph. The arena fell silent. Then, from the observation deck where the other human cadets were watching, a cheer erupted. Reeves. 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 Instructor Greel finally found his voice. Silence. He roared, stomping toward the human cadet who was now leaning against the finish line marker, breathing heavily but still wearing that ridiculous grin. Cadet Reeves. What part of standard obstacle protocol involves getting yourself electrocuted by a plasma barrier? Sorry, sir, the human replied, not looking remotely sorry. I thought I could clear it. And did you? Clear it? Not exactly, sir. But I will next time. Next time? I nearly dropped my datapad. Was he seriously planning to try again? There won't be a next time, cadet, Greel growled, looming over the human. You'll be in the medical bay for at least a week. Medic. Medic. But Jackson Reeves straightened up and met the instructor's gaze directly. Another protocol violation that would earn most cadets a week of sanitation duty. With respect, sir, I'm fine. Just a scratch. A scratch? The readings on my monitor showed second-degree burns across 15% of his body, a mild concussion, and enough tissue damage to keep most species sedated for days. Professor Dunzar, Instructor Greel called up to me without taking his eyes off the human. Your professional assessment, please. I cleared my throat and activated the arena's comm system. Cadet Reeves appears to have sustained significant injuries from contact with the plasma barrier. By any reasonable medical standard, he should be experiencing extreme pain and mobility impairment. See? Greel said to Reeves. Now get your sorry carcass to medical before I carry you there myself. The human had the audacity to shrug. Science doesn't know everything, sir. I grew up with 3 older brothers. This is nothing compared to what they'd do to me on a slow Tuesday. I furiously made notes. Family units as training for combat resilience, intentional injuring of juvenile humans as preparatory conditioning, Ivarn, Bransnetitset, Galo, Brandur, indigent beasts. This required further study. Besides, Reeves continued, we have combat training after lunch, and I don't want to miss it. At this point, a medical drone had arrived and was scanning the human. Its lights blinked from green to yellow to red, and it emitted a series of urgent beeps. The drone is recommending immediate medical intervention. I translated from my position. See? Greel gestured at the drone. Even the machine thinks you're being stupid. Reeves looked at the drone, then back at Greel, then up at me. His expression shifted from defiance to a calculating look that, I must admit, sent a shiver down my spine. Tell you what, he said slowly. Let me finish my training for today. If I pass out or start performing below standard, I'll go straight to medical. No arguments. Absolutely not, I interjected before Greel could respond. That's completely against protocol and medically irresponsible. But, the human continued as if I hadn't spoken. If I complete the day's training without incident, Professor Dunzar includes it in his research. Human resilience, myth or terrifying reality? Something like that. I bristled. How did he know about my research title? That was supposed to be classified. Instructor Greel surprised me by throwing back his massive head and laughing. A sound like boulders tumbling down a mountainside. You've got quad spheres, Reeves. I'll give you that, sir. This is highly irregular, I protested. The cadet requires medical attention. Professor, Greel replied. In actual combat, there won't always be a medical bay conveniently located. Sometimes, soldiers need to push through pain and injury to complete the mission. This isn't actual combat. It's a training exercise. It's a military academy. Greel countered. Every exercise is preparation for actual combat. He turned back to Reeves. You've got your deal, Cadet, but if you so much as stumble, I'm personally dragging you to medical, and you'll be cleaning the waste recyclers for a month. The human's face lit up with that alarming expression they call a smile. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. I switched off the comm and turned to Telva, who was staring at me with all four eyes wide. Did that just happen? She asked. Unfortunately, yes, I sighed, adding a new section to my research notes, suicidal tendencies or evolutionary advantage. The human pain response anomaly. What are you going to do? Telva asked. I watched as Cadet Reeves jogged off the training floor, trailing the increasingly distressed medical drone. What any self-respecting scientist would do, I replied, packing up my equipment. I'm going to follow him, gather data, and hopefully understand how a species so fragile-looking can be so infuriatingly resilient. And if he collapses? I'll be the first to say I told you so before calling medical. I paused, considering. Actually, I'll call medical first, then say I told you so. I'm not a monster. As we left the observation booth, I couldn't help but wonder, what else were these humans capable of that defied our understanding? And more importantly, should the rest of the galaxy be concerned? Little did I know, Cadet Jackson Reeves was about to show me exactly why humans were simultaneously the most frightening and fascinating species in the Galactic Confederation. And I, poor fool that I was, would be there to document every impossible moment. Lunch at the Galactic Confederation Academy was always a spectacle of evolutionary diversity. The cafeteria featured 12 different atmospheric sections, 15 distinct temperature zones, and nutrient delivery systems designed for everything from photosynthesizers to silicon-based life forms. I had positioned myself at a table with a clear view of Cadet Reeves, who sat among a group of other humans and assorted species brave enough to share their eating space. My scanner was discreetly monitoring his vital signs, which continued to baffle me. His core temperature has already dropped back to human baseline, I muttered to Telva, who was delicately consuming a gelatinous protein cube. And the epidermal regeneration around the burn sites has accelerated by 47% compared to our medical models. Perhaps our models are wrong, Telva suggested, waving one of her appendages dismissively. My models are never wrong, I sniffed, adjusting my sensory apparatus. They're occasionally incomplete, but never wrong. Across the cafeteria, Reeves was laughing at something a Navarian cadet had said. Laughing. With second-degree burns still visible on his exposed skin, he's eating a double portion, Telva observed. Indeed, the human's tray was piled with various nutrient sources, primarily the protein-heavy options that humans seem to prefer. As I watched, he finished his first serving and immediately stood up to get more. Fascinating, I noted in my recorder. Subject appears to be instinctively increasing caloric intake to fuel accelerated healing response. Or he's just hungry. Telva offered unhelpfully. Science demands we look beyond the obvious. Telva. I chided her. Everything has meaning. Patterns within patterns. When Reeves returned to his table, he was accompanied by another human cadet, a female with copper-colored head, fur tied back in what humans called a ponytail. According to my database, this was Cadet Amara Fletcher, ranked 3rd in her tactical training class. You absolute moron, she said to Reeves, loudly enough for my enhanced audio receptors to pick up. A plasma barrier? Seriously? What part of navigate around wasn't clear? Reeves grinned through a mouthful of food. Time efficiency, Fletcher. Straight line's always shorter. A straight line through an emergency room isn't efficient, genius, she replied, punching him in the shoulder. I gasped. She's striking his injured tissue deliberately. Is this some form of human dominance display? Gaisa. Professor. Telva sighed. I believe it's what humans call friendly contact. They're odd that way. Nothing about intentional pain infliction can be classified as friendly, I argued. Hey, Professor Tentacles, Reeves called out suddenly, waving in my direction. If you're going to spy on me, at least come join us. Your creepy staring is putting me off my potatoes. Yadadza, Ustad, Buznaus. I froze, my outer membrane flushing a deep purple with embarrassment. He spotted us. Yay, you've been pointing a scanner at him for 20 minutes while muttering into your recorder. Telva pointed out, humans may lack auxiliary eyes, but they're not blind. With as much dignity as I could muster, I gathered my equipment and approached the cadets' table. I was merely conducting standard observational research, Cadet Reeves, and the name is Professor Dunzar, not Tentacles. Sorry, Prof, Reeves said, not sounding remotely apologetic. Have a seat. Want some pudding? It's the only edible thing they serve here. I do not consume processed sucrose, I replied stiffly, settling my posterior cushion onto the bench across from him. How are your injuries, Cadet? Fletcher snorted. What he has isn't an injury, it's a case of terminal stupidity. Harsh, Fletcher. True, but harsh, Reeves replied, then turned back to me. I'm fine, Prof. Told you I would be. The medical drone registered significant trauma, I reminded him. Medical drones are calibrated for average galactic physiology, he countered, surprising me with his technical knowledge. Human baseline readings always look wonky to Confederation tech. Wonky? I repeated, unfamiliar with the term. Abnormal, Fletcher translated. Our heart rates, body temperature, neural activities, they're all outliers on your scales. That's actually correct, I admitted. Impressed despite myself. How did you know that? Fletcher shrugged. I read the orientation materials. Nobody reads the orientation materials, I said. Genuinely shocked. Fletcher does, Reeves said, nudging her with his elbow. Total nerd. Duh, some of us like to know what we're getting into, she replied. Like, for instance, knowing that jumping over plasma barriers is specifically listed as extremely dangerous and prohibited on page 94. Reeves waved a utensil dismissively. Rules are more like suggestions with consequences. I started taking notes again. This casual disregard for safety protocols, is it a common trait among humans, or specific to you, Cadet Reeves? Before he could answer, a loud alarm blared throughout the cafeteria. All around us, cadets jumped to attention. Combat training, Reeves exclaimed, looking entirely too excited for someone who should be in a medical regeneration chamber. Right on schedule. Cadet Reeves, I began sternly. Given your condition. A deal's a deal, Professor, he interrupted, already standing. Unless you're forfeiting your chance at exclusive research data. I bristled at the implication. I never forfeit research opportunities. But as the ranking medical authority present, you're a xenobiologist, not a medical doctor, Fletcher pointed out. I have 3 doctorates. I protested. None in human medicine, she countered with infuriating accuracy. I was beginning to see why these two humans were friends. They shared an irritating ability to challenge authority through technicalities. Fine, I conceded. But I'll be observing the entire session. Wouldn't have it any other way, Prof, Reeves said with that unsettling human expression they called a wink. 20 minutes later, I stood at the edge of the combat arena, growing increasingly agitated as I watched Cadet Reeves participate in what could only be described as voluntary torture. The combat training session involved hand-to-hand sparring with various species, and Reeves had been paired with a Dromerian cadet whose exoskeleton gave him a significant advantage in both offense and defense. This is completely unfair, I muttered to Telva, who had joined me after finishing her lunch. The Dromerian has natural armor. Reeves is essentially hitting a wall. A wall that hits back, Telva observed as the Dromerian landed a solid blow to Reeves' torso right where the plasma burns were still visible through his torn uniform. I winced. That had to hurt. But instead of collapsing or even showing significant pain, Reeves merely staggered back a step, regained his balance, and charged forward again. This time, he feinted to the left before diving low, targeting the Dramarian's joint sections, the only vulnerable parts of their anatomy. The Dramarian went down with a crash that reverberated through the arena floor. He identified a structural weakness and exploited it, Telva noted with professional admiration. But how is he still functioning? I demanded, checking my scanner again. His pain receptors are definitely active. His nervous system is registering the damage. By all physiological metrics, he should be incapacitated. Perhaps came a deep voice from behind us. You're asking the wrong question. I turned to find Instructor Greel standing there, his granite-like features impassive as he observed the sparring. What do you mean? I asked. You keep wondering why the human isn't stopped by pain, Greel said. Maybe the real question is, what drives him to continue despite it? I blinked all three of my eyes in sequence. That's actually quite insightful, Instructor, Greel grunted. Been training soldiers for 97 cycles, Professor. You learn a few things about motivation. Down in the arena, Reeves had helped the Dramarian back to his feet, and they were discussing something animatedly, with Reeves gesturing to various points on the Dramarian's exoskeleton. Teaching him about his own weaknesses, I realized with surprise, humans are pack animals, Greel continued, highly social. They don't just fight for themselves, they fight for each other, for their unit. But this is just training, I pointed out. There's nothing at stake. Greel's laugh was like distant thunder. To you, maybe. To Reeves? His reputation, his standing among peers, his personal code of what he calls toughness, all high-value status markers in human culture. As if to prove Greel's point, the other human cadets began cheering as Reeves took on his next opponent, a Valerian with prehensile limbs that could attack from multiple angles. They're encouraging self-destructive behavior, I said. Aghast, they're celebrating resilience. Greel corrected. It's a trait that's kept their species alive on a death world that should have eliminated them millennia ago. I frowned. Earth isn't classified as a death world, no? Greel raised what passed for an eyebrow. Extreme temperature variations. Regular natural disasters, apex predators in every biome. Microscopic organisms that cause debilitating diseases, their own bodies producing cancerous cells, and that's before they started fighting each other. Put that way, it did sound rather challenging. Humans don't just survive, Greel continued. They adapt. They endure. And most importantly, they remember. Remember what? Pain. Victory. Defeat. Techniques. Weaknesses. Patterns, Greel listed. Their brains are wired for pattern recognition in a way few species can match. Watch. He pointed to where Reeves was now circling the Valerian cautiously. The previous aggressive charge was gone, replaced by a measured, analytical approach. He's studying its movements, Telva realized. Learning, Greel confirmed. Humans call it getting a read on their opponent, once he has the pattern. As if on cue, Reeves suddenly moved, not toward the Valerian but at an angle, disrupting its defensive stance. 3 quick strikes later, the Valerian signaled submission. Remarkable, I admitted, making rapid notes. Adaptive tactical thinking, combined with pain suppression, creates a formidable combination. That's why we wanted them in the academy, Greel said quietly. The hegemony threat is growing. We need soldiers who can think differently, who can endure. The mention of the hegemony sent a chill through my primary circulation system. The expansionist empire had been pressing against Confederation borders for decades, their hive mind troops showing little regard for casualties. Their encounters with human forces had been complicated. The hegemony doesn't understand humans, Greel continued. They see the physical fragility and assume weakness. They don't comprehend what drives a species to continue fighting when retreat is the logical choice. And what is that? I asked, genuinely curious. Greel's expression turned grim. Spite. Spite? I repeated, confused. Pure, stubborn refusal to do what their enemy wants, Greel explained. Tell a human they can't do something, and watch how quickly they try to prove you wrong. Down in the arena, the combat training was wrapping up. Reeves was breathing heavily, sweat soaking his uniform, but still standing, still functional. Still, impossibly smiling. Final exercise. The assistant instructor announced, "Survival simulation. Teams of 4, last team standing wins extra recreation privileges." I watched in disbelief as Reeves immediately volunteered, despite having already participated in more combat rounds than any other cadet. "He's going to collapse," I predicted, checking my scanner again. "His body can't sustain this level of exertion with untreated injuries. Care to make it official?" Greel asked, a sly look crossing his stony features. "What do you mean?" "Put on a wager, Professor." "Academic, of course. I say he not only completes the exercise but leads his team to victory. You say he fails." I straightened my posture indignantly. "I do not engage in gambling." "Instructor, it's beneath my scientific dignity, not gambling," Greel corrected. "A hypothesis test with personal investment in the outcome." Telva made a sound suspiciously like a suppressed laugh. "Fine," I said, irritated. "What are the stakes of this hypothesis test? If he fails, I personally escort him to medical and put a formal reprimand in his file for ignoring safety protocols," Greel said. "If he succeeds, you include a full account of today's events in your next publication to the Science Academy." "That's," I sputtered. "My research publications are peer-reviewed. I can't simply include anecdotal observations. Afraid your colleagues won't believe it?" "Barav." Greel's tone was deliberately provocative, "or afraid they will." Before I could formulate a suitably scathing response, a commotion from the arena drew our attention. The survival simulation had begun, with 4 teams navigating a rapidly changing environment filled with holographic hazards and combat drones programmed to test their responses. Reeves had been teamed with Fletcher, the Dramarian he'd fought earlier, and a sylphoid cadet whose gaseous form gave them scouting advantages, an odd combination. But as I watched, I began to see the logic. The Dramarian provided defense, the sylphoid reconnaissance, Fletcher tactical coordination, and Reeves, well, Reeves appeared to be the willing distraction by drawing fire from the combat drones while his teammates executed flanking maneuvers. "He's using himself as bait," I realized. Horrified yet fascinated, deliberately putting himself in harm's way to create opportunities for his team. "Standard human tactic," Greel confirmed. "They call it taking one for the team. Their pain tolerance makes them uniquely suited for it." One by one, the other teams were eliminated from the simulation. Reeves' team, despite or perhaps because of their unorthodox tactics, continued advancing. When the sylphoid was tagged out by a drone, the remaining 3 adjusted instantly, with Fletcher taking over scouting duties while Reeves and the Dramarian worked in remarkably synchronized tandem. "They shouldn't be this coordinated," I murmured. "They've never trained together before today." "Human adaptability," Greel said with something like respect in his voice. "They can form functional units with almost any species willing to work with them. It's why the hegemony fears them so much." "The hegemony doesn't fear anything," I objected. "Their neural programming eliminates fear responses." Greel fixed me with a knowing look. "Then why did they attempt to block human admission to the academy? Why the diplomatic protests? The thinly veiled threats? I hadn't considered that." The hegemony representative had indeed been unusually vocal about keeping humans out of Confederation military training. At the time, I'd assumed it was standard political posturing. A loud buzzer signaled the end of the simulation. Looking down, I was shocked to see Reeves and Fletcher the only cadets left standing in the arena, their team the clear victors. Reeves looked terrible, sweaty, bloody, his uniform torn and singed, but he was grinning that manic human grin and exchanging a complicated hand gesture with Fletcher that my database identified as a high five. "Well, Professor?" Greel prompted. "It seems your hypothesis has been disproven," I sighed, slumping slightly. "So it has. I don't understand it, but I cannot deny the evidence before me." "Understanding will come with time," Greel said, surprisingly gentle. "But consider this. Today you've witnessed why humans are both the most promising cadets we've ever admitted and potentially the most dangerous." "Dangerous?" I looked at him sharply. "You mean to the hegemony?" "To anyone who threatens what they care about," Greel clarified. "Their physical fragility is deceptive." Behind it lies a psychological resilience that borders on pathological by most species standards. As we watched, medical personnel had finally approached Reeves, who was allowing them to examine his injuries now that the day's training was complete. He was still talking animatedly to Fletcher and several other cadets who had gathered around, apparently describing some part of the simulation with enthusiastic gestures. "Will you include this in your report to the Academy Board?" Greel asked. "Of course," I replied. "It's my scientific duty to report all observations accurately, regardless of how improbable they might seem." "Good," Greel nodded. "Because the hegemony has spies everywhere, and I want them to read exactly what that human cadet did today. I want them to understand what they're facing." "You're using my research as psychological warfare?" I asked. Oddly flattered. "I'm using the truth as a warning," Greel corrected. "The truth that a human cadet took a hit that would hospitalize most species and just kept walking." Later that evening, I sat in my lab, finalizing my report. The medical scans of Cadet Reeves confirmed what I'd observed. He had indeed sustained significant injuries from the plasma barrier, followed by additional trauma during combat training. Yet his body was already showing remarkable healing rates, and his psychological evaluation showed no signs of distress. "Humans don't break," I dictated into my recorder for the final notes. "They bend, they adapt, they endure. What doesn't kill them doesn't just make them stronger, it makes them more determined, more focused, more dangerous." I paused, considering Greel's words about the hegemony, about why they feared human integration into the Confederation military. "Perhaps that is the most remarkable trait of humanity," I continued, "not their physical resilience, impressive though it is, but their ability to transform pain into purpose, to convert injury into determination, to face overwhelming odds and respond, not with logical retreat but with defiant advance." I thought of Reeves, smiling through his pain, pushing beyond normal limits, refusing to be stopped. "In conclusion," I finished, "I believe that if the hegemony does indeed fear humans, they are entirely correct to do so. Because a species that views the impossible as merely a challenge to be overcome is perhaps the most formidable ally or enemy that the galaxy could ever know." I submitted my report, attached the medical scans and combat footage, and sent it all to the Science Academy with the highest priority designation. Let the hegemony spies read it. Let them worry, let them wonder. Because if one human cadet could accomplish what I'd witnessed today, what could a united human military force achieve? I, for one, was grateful they were on our side. For now,